and welcome to our second Community Development Block Grant hearing. It's August 28th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. We need to introduce everyone in the room. So if we can start over here with Mrs. Butterfield, you please introduce yourself.
Okay, Judith Butterfield, I represent the 3rd Ward.
John Lawver, 3rd Ward.
Matthew Moon, 2nd Ward.
Wesley Heyser, 1st Ward.
Chris Berger, 2nd Ward.
Sarah
Abby
Stahl,
Lawson,
Assistant
First
Borough
Ward.
Manager.
Charles Gable, Gettysburg Borough Manager.
Carly Marshall, Planning Director.
Jacob Spear. I'll be here for Chad Clayball as Borough Engineer.
C.S. Davidson, correct?
C.S. Davidson, yes.
Mr. Harwood, go.
Robert Harbaugh, Public Works Director for the borough.
Okay. I think it's everyone present. This is a federal regulation, Jim. I'm not going to mess this up.
Jim Hale from the Gettysburg Times.
Okay.
Patty.
Patty Lawson is joining us via telephone. Sue?
Sue Sipperly.
Okay.
Grant Street resident.
Yeah. Gentleman in the back.
Corey Smith, Community Media.
Yep. And Mayor Freeman.
Mayor Freeling, Borough of Gettysburg.
All right. So we have everyone that is in attendance on the record. This evening we will have an brief explanation of the CDBG program, and then a proposal for use of the fiscal year 2023 CDBG funds. So with that, I introduce Planning Director Ms. Marshall.
Thank you. So CDBG is a program, a community development block grant program by which we receive an annual allocation of funds from the state. It's technically a federal program, but it's administered by the state. This year, our award is $129,141. These funds can be used to benefit low to moderate income persons, remove slums or blight, or meet any urgent community need. And included in that includes ADA compliance. So what the borough is proposing for this year, do you want me to go into what we're proposing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We are proposing to use the entire $129,141 on repair of ADA curb cuts. We have a lot of alleys that we never created ADA compliant curb cuts for when we did the curb cuts throughout the borough in the past. Chad Clayball actually identified about 60 of them, and which is more than we could do in 1 year's allocation. It'll probably take about 3 years, so we are able to kind of give them a list of about a third of those with some alternates just in case we have a little bit of extra wiggle room to cover 1 or 2 extra. And we are not budgeting for admin fees this year. We're proposing to use the entire allocation on the improvements.
And for the benefit of the public, it may be helpful if you have the other document that shows I know it's the whole list of all the curb cuts, but yeah, they actually have photographs of every single curb cut.
Yeah, so the ones that are not compliant, are the ones, there are places where there are no curb cuts in the alleys. There are also places where there are curb cuts, but they don't have the truncated domes, and the curb cuts are not created with reinforced concrete. And so that the area where the dome would go needs to be removed. It needs to be reinforced concrete, and then we need to have that textured, that yellow, it's like a rectangle with little round dots on it, need to be applied for it to be ADA compliant.
Are there questions about the nature of the proposed improvements that we're discussing here?
No, just thank you for explaining that, Carly. Not being there, I can actually visualize it, so thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's a whole mix mash of different styles that were put in over the the decades, and this would bring them up to standard. Any discussion or further explanation? I mean, this is actually fairly straightforward. Okay, public comment? Okay, seeing no public comment, we will adjourn the hearing. Welcome to our August work session here of the Borough of Gettysburg. A few announcements, upcoming meetings to be aware of. We will be starting our 2024 budget process very shortly. So you'll note there's a council meeting, of course, on Tuesday, October 10th at 7 p.m. That'll be the evening the budget proposal will be unveiled. We'll have work sessions for the budget on Monday, October 16th, Monday, October 23rd, Monday, October 30th, and if required, Monday, November 6th, all those occurring at 7 p.m. Here in these chambers. The council meeting, when we vote to advertise the budget, will be projected to occur November 13th at 7 p.m. here in chambers. The public review of the budget will be posted by November 20th for public review on the borough's website and also be available here at the office. And then the council meeting to adopt the budget would be projected to occur on Monday, December 12th, 2023 at 7 p.m. An executive session of the Borough Council, the Borough of Gettysburg, was conducted immediately following the adjournment of the August 14th, 2023 council business meeting consistent with Section 708A1 and Section 708A5 of the Sunshine Act. An executive session of the Borough Council, the Borough of Gettysburg, will be conducted immediately following the adjournment of this evening's monthly work session business meeting consistent with Section 708A1 and Section 708A5 of the Sunshine Act for the following purposes. 1. To provide information and discuss matters involving the employment, the terms and conditions of employment, the salary and benefits of administrative employees, and the investigation of complaints involving current borough employees. And 2. To review and discuss matters of borough business which, if conducted in public, could lead to the disclosure of information and matters of confidentiality protected by law. All right, this evening we'll begin with a presentation on the Fire Protective Services Tax by the Gettysburg Fire Department. Mr. Ken Kime and Mr. Russell McCutcheon are with us this evening. So yeah, if you can find the podium. If you just want to use the podium, we can get the folks at home then. They'll have the microphone.
Good evening. For those who don't know me, I'm Ken Kime. I'm the Assistant Chief of the Gettysburg Fire Department. With me is Russell McCutcheon, who serves as the Captain of the Gettysburg Fire Department. And we both happen to be homeowners here in the borough as well. This evening we'd like to speak with you concerning the fire tax. For those that are unaware of the fire tax, it was a project that came about from the Adams County Council of Government back in 2013, so it's been with us for 10 years now. The tax was set up to supplement budgets within the fire departments throughout the county. It was not designed to replace all of our funding revenue. So the fire tax is a large part of our budget, but we also derive income from front room rentals. We lease our kitchen space. We lease floor space to Adams Regional EMS. We have a weekly online raffle. We recently, for the last 2 years, we've participated in the July 4th bingo out at the rec park. We have a cash bash fundraiser. That has largely replaced the carnival that we all remember, and an annual solicitation or other areas where we derive income from. The original fire tax the study was put together by a man named John Seneff, who was a consultant, who was a retired fire chief from York City Fire Department. And he worked not only with the council of government, but many offices within Adams County, Office of Planning, the Commissioner's Office, and also the fire departments all participated in this study that was led by, at that time, Sharon Hom from Strabane Township. And they were trying to find a way is how do we equitably provide some type of funding to the fire departments. And John looked at several ways of doing that, and eventually he came up with tying the assessed property values within the first due coverage areas of a fire department. And it was kind of a novel idea, and the reason he did that was if you have increased assessed values, that generally meant you had increased development, more traffic was going through your area, denser development, which generally related to more call volume for those fire departments. In the study, Gettysburg was specifically called out as one of those unique areas where this would really be a good way to fund this, as we have townships where we may be one of 2, 3, 4, or at that time up to 5 fire departments. We covered, as Gettysburg, we covered a very dense area of US 30 compared to other areas that were very rural, agricultural in nature. So that was the model they picked. And in looking at the fire department's budgets, they came up with a 0.25 mil for assessed value as a way to provide funding to the fire departments. 2013 was the first year that went into being used. Our budget that year was $621,000, of which Gettysburg Borough contributed $128,396 to. Our 2023 budget is now $881,200, which is a $259,000 difference over a 10-year period, which goes pretty much in line with the cost of living and inflation rates over that 10-year period. There was one big issue with this funding model, and that was that the property values tend to, or that assessment tends to be kind of flat over time. And it didn't account for inflation, and there was no way to really work that in with doing it strictly based on the assessed value and that flat mill. And we do have some examples of some areas of where we're seeing increased funding that Russ can speak to quickly.
Thank you, Ken. So as Chief Kime pointed out, things are costing more, and the fire tax was originally instituted in 2013. So where we can, we tried to run some 2013 numbers and some 2023 numbers. In 2013, one set of personal protective equipment, that's the firefighter gear. That's your helmet, coat, pants, boots, gloves, the whole bit. In 2013, about $2,500. Today, $6,100. Huge increase for these sorts of things. Portable radios, you'll see that's a 2016 number. That's because that's when the new radio system went into effect. So these are actual numbers from invoices we paid in 2016, $5,359. 2023, $8,333 to replace one radio. The really nice thing about the portable radio purchase was they were all done at the same time because it was a new radio system. The unfortunate part of that is they're all going out of service at the same time because it was a new radio system. And the ones that we have now are discontinued. We had one radio that was broken. We're experiencing it was 8 months to get the parts to get that replaced. And that will probably increase over time. The biggest thing, the big yellow trucks going down the road, the fire engine, we're using a 2010 number because that's the last real invoice that we have. We are the proud owners of a 2010 Sutphen engine, $425,625. That is for the engine itself and not for all the stuff that goes on it, like hose and tools. We have a new engine coming in 2023. And we actually signed the contract for that engine in December of 21. And in December of 21, that 2023 engine, $763,360. So prices are going up, and that's what we're facing.
So what we are here to request from the borough is to take into account the inflationary costs that we're seeing, like every household is, and to increase the millage to a 0.5 mil from the current 0.25. And that would help in balancing future budgets as we move forward. One thing I'd like to note is that with the ability to not do as many fundraisers, we can do more things that are directly fire related, such as training. Every Tuesday night we have department training at the station. Our goal is to retain qualified volunteers for as long as possible. I don't think you really want to hear the proposed millage from the National Volunteer Fire Council if we had to go career based. So it's our goal to stay volunteer as long as possible, and this is one tool that helps us to do that. Another tool that we are learning how to use, we're working in our recruitment and retention. I thank the borough for your recent ordinance on the both the income and property tax for the active volunteers. Russ and I will be ones that will be able to take advantage of that. Thank you for that, because that certainly is something that we will build into our recruitment and retention as we move forward. We also are looking to take that concept to townships. Some of the townships is maybe a little more difficult because we're not the only fire department there. So we'll have to work within the confines of how that township will work with 3, 4, or 5 other fire departments for people that live in those areas. We are also looking at moving a conversation forward with townships with this same concept with the fire tax as well. So we're not coming to pick on Gettysburg Borough. Frankly, I think the relationship between Gettysburg Borough and the Gettysburg Fire Department, I've used our relationship as an example many times, how we share some employees and some other resources. And I usually get the deer in the headlight look when I say, well, yeah, our business manager, we work that through the borough. Some people just can't understand that good working relationship that we have here. So that's a good thing to come. And I think Gettysburg provides leadership as well to the county, both here in this chamber and at Stratton Street. People look to Gettysburg as to how we manage things. And lastly, the county's also working on a property tax credit. I want to believe that came about to some degree because of what happened here. So there's a lot of conversation taking place as to how we keep volunteers active and engaged in the county. So, Russ, did I miss anything, or do you have anything to add?
I think we take questions.
Yep, I'm okay.
Yeah, so at this time, if you have any questions that'd be appropriate to ask, when we conclude here, I would like to be able to give Charles some direction. He's crafting the budget as whether to enter that at 0.25 mils or 0.5 mils.
Before council starts their conversation, just a point of clarification. The 0.25 increase would be at roughly speaking, or with regard to the assessed valuation in the borough, would be an additional $125,000 ballpark of additional revenue. So we currently at the 0.25 are providing the fire department about $125,000 a year annually. That would double, so we'd be at the 250 level.
Yeah, for a normal homeowner, you're talking
Right.
about an increase of about $50. So it's $25 per 100,000 for a quarter mil. Mr. Carr, yes, please.
I don't know, so I'm gonna ask, because I think I know, and I want everybody to know. What is the national if we were to go professional?
When I ran it a few years ago, it was 3.8. It's now about 4.25.
I was gonna say it's probably close to 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would be probably similar to maybe what police is, and that's not a jab there. Just they would kind of go similar to one another is what you'd see on increase.
I have a question to ask, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
This
Yes.
is Patty Lawson, participating by phone. Thank you, Mr. Kime and Mr. McCutcheon, for your report, and also for the work that you do with the fire department, and the fact that it is a volunteer fire department. We're very fortunate to have the level of professionalism and expertise in our community, so I want to thank you both. I wanted to ask you, can you share a little bit about I know you mentioned, fundraisers, but some of the larger institutions in the community, like the hospital and the college, do they voluntarily make donations to the fire department typically? Just out of curiosity.
There are some do it through like a service agreement. We are right now in communication with WellSpan about a possible donation. Gettysburg College has been a fantastic benefactor through the years. And I didn't mention grants, but we do go after grants as well. There's a couple issues with grants that we run into. One is they are very competitive. We have been fortunate that our last 2 rounds of the air packs that we wear, we were able to fund about 95%, I think it's the right number, through a firefighter's grant at the national level, which saved us probably close to $250,000.
Wow.
But those are not always available. We apply, sometimes we get them, sometimes we don't. Right now, we are working, we were awarded a SAFER grant for recruitment and retention. You'll start to see some billboards go up. That's part of the recruiting piece. Part of our retention piece is we have been offering physicals to the membership, and the SAFER grant will help to be paying for that, as well as possibly some station upgrades. So those are areas that we do go after, but it's not a fixed or reliable funding stream.
Sure, I understand. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Questions and discussion? Mr. Lawver?
I know the answer, but a lot of people don't. Do you have the numbers from 2013 roughly on call volume?
2013 probably was around, probably would have been around, what, 475 or so. We've run to date 504 this year. So we're, when I first rejoined the department in 1989, there was a really good chief there at that time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think we were running, we were still the busiest department. I think we were running about 330 calls or so a year. So the call volume, you know, it follows the population, and in the commercial, you know, buildings that are going up, it just follows everything. And we're getting older too, so that adds to call volumes.
Yeah. Questions and comments? What are people thinking? We give Charles some direction.
Well, I've spent the last 2 years sitting between these two mustaches, and when they start talking fire trucks, it's hard to turn them off. And I've gleaned that the costs are out of control. Anything made out of rubber, the cost is out of control. Windshield wiper reservoir tanks, you can't get them. Trucks are sitting at these ends of these assembly lines, and they can't roll out because they don't have this one tiny $3 plastic part. I think this is a no-brainer. Your costs are out of control, and you guys work to keep us safe at all times. So personally, I would support this wholeheartedly, gratefully.
I would also support it. I'd support even more. I think that in the reality of the situation, were we a professional fire department, it would cost the taxpayers a lot more. We're very fortunate to have our volunteer fire department. I would like to ask one, so I'm definitely in support. I would like to ask one more question. Is the fire department a 501c3 or 501c something else? Three. Do you currently participate with the Adams County Community Foundation's Giving Spree?
We have discussed that. We're actually talking about that, about attending, but we possibly are looking at a different avenue than monetary from them. We're actually looking at it as a possible recruiting avenue where maybe grandparents and parents maybe talk to their...
Well, that's the best thing about it. And while the borough is just one small portion of the county, as we know, there are a lot of folks in Adams County that would very much appreciate what the Borough of Gettysburg Fire Department does, volunteer fire department does here. And I think that it could be some type of income, generating some income on the fundraising side. It also has opportunities for endowments, which is very important. Any 501c3 can have an endowment fund there, so that we always can support our volunteer fire department. But I'm absolutely in support of the raise.
That's a great suggestion.
Sputterfield?
I support it.
Berger?
I'm from Altoona, PA originally, and
the land that Tom forgot.
The paid fire department, know a lot of people, and being here for 25 years, I'm just amazed and grateful the amount of hours that you guys put in, unpaid, protecting lives, protecting property, and dangerous times risking your own life to do it. I was doing a little research. The National Fire Protection Association estimates that the time donated by volunteer firefighters saves communities nearly $47 billion each year. And I'm definitely for supporting you. $125,000 would be about one firefighter if the borough would pay for it.
Yes.
So I think our public would support the investment, and we just appreciate everything that you do. And we want to keep and you know, the retention, and just know that we support you here at the borough.
Appreciate that.
So thank you very much.
Ms. Lawson? Patty?
Yes, I very much support this. Sorry, I had you on mute. I was.
That's fine. Appreciate it. That's fine. Okay, Charles, I think you have your direction. Gentlemen, thank you. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
both.
Thank you.
All right. So that'll take us to public comment. Now, please note this first public comment session is restricted to items that appear on the agenda. So if you have not seen a copy of the agenda, you'll see that. You can get a copy there at the entrance. So please just give your name, your address, and please do use the podium so that the public at home, the people at home can hear your public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? All right. Seeing none, we'll go on to the employee policy manual.
So council has been methodically going through a very old version of the employee policy manual over the last many months. I think we started this in the late winter months. And what you have in front of you is a very robust and much improved document that would lay the foundation for borough staff in all departments. So with that, I would also add that this document has been thoroughly vetted along the process of you, as council's been deliberating its various iterations, and so Labor Council has essentially endorsed what we have in front of you. There are just a few areas that you'll see in yellow highlight, which it's Labor Council's recommendation that we remove those areas, and then of course we could add those back in at some point at any time, really, because this would be something that would be passed by resolution.
Okay, so I think the way I'd like to do this is proceed sequentially, but we're not going to go, of course, item by item. So if anyone has any notes of items they need adjusted in chapters 1 through 5.
I had a question on chapter 3.
Okay.
3.1.8 through 3.1.10. Several of the addresses are listed as 0. I know at least one of them is a 0, but are all those zeros correct?
The zeros are because they're not physical addresses with physical structures.
Okay.
Some of them are like grass strips to allow access for Robbie's guys to plow snow, for example, those types of things.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions in chapters 1 through 5? Seeing none, chapters 6 through 10. Seeing none, chapters 11 through 15. Seeing none, chapters 16 through 20. Seeing none, chapters 21 through 25. Seeing none, chapters 26 through 30. Seeing none, any between inclusive of chapters 31 through 36, which is the conclusion.
Yeah, 35.6.3 parentheses 2 talks about a reasonable suspicion checklist. It's highlighted in yellow. So you're saying that that's to be struck or to be added?
Any answer to that?
Gretchen, sorry, Labor Council suggested to strike it.
Okay. It wasn't in the previous draft, so I'm curious how that was added, what it means, what that checklist is. I don't think we've ever discussed that, so I'm not sure how that got into the
Labor
this
Council
version?
provided, because it's the drug and alcohol testing policy, I mean, the drug and alcohol policy in general, was completely redone, and that was by Labor Council. So the reasonable suspicion checklist, she recommended to remove it unless we have one. I would just recommend to remove it.
And so how does that read if we strike it?
What do you mean?
How would that section read?
Just end with interview the employee, period, I guess.
Yeah.
And they're going to be referring up to the factors in subsection A.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'd read, if the department head / chief of police believes that the employee may be under the influence, conduct an interview with the employee.
Yes.
Okay.
And each department also follows their own checklists as well. They follow their own checklist. So the police, if there was like an accident or anything like that, then of course they have to follow their policy and procedure of their own outside of the borough's policy here.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
That was all I had.
Are there any other questions?
33.3, the employee complaint policy, that's in yellow also.
Yes. Gretchen wanted to remove it to be put back in later after it's been reviewed and edited.
Okay, so we're not doing away with that, we're just cleaning it up.
We're cleaning it up and then putting it back in, so it would be a temporary removal, and then we can do a resolution later after it's been thoroughly vetted and edited, and put it back in.
How has it not been thoroughly vetted?
There were some issues that came up in...
I don't want to misstate this. So the borough employs Campbell Durant as our labor attorney. Whenever there is a lawsuit, Selective Insurance employs a different attorney to defend the borough in litigation. That attorney has some questions about how this policy is phrased to put the borough in the best position to defend the borough if such litigation were to occur.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. We did have this vetted by 2 separate attorneys, though, right, from 2 separate firms.
Gretchen, our labor attorney, vetted it.
And our solicitor, yes?
And Harry Eastman, correct, yes.
So are we not confident in it as it exists?
I do think it's a different perspective, if you will, in terms of Mr. Kroll's request to vet that stuff. He noted he thought that there were some issues that again would put the borough in a less than favorable position with regards to litigation. So, and he's actually been in the process of doing that.
Okay.
This would still exist as an adopted policy separately, correct?
Correct.
Yes. That's how I see this.
Correct.
This is about getting the manual where you want it to be.
Okay.
Yeah, the policy that the council adopted several months ago is just copied here verbatim.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess the question I would have, Mr. President, is does the council wish to adopt this without this language, or do you want to wait for the final version and have this in place already?
individually, I think it should be in there. I think that if you get 10 attorneys in a room, you're going to get 10 different opinions.
I'm sorry, could you speak up a little bit?
Sorry, I think if you get 10 attorneys in a room, you're going to get 10 different opinions. If it were me, I would just leave it in there. There's a lot of vetting done of that, and it does give us some tools. I understand that, you know, there are differences of opinion, but without something to replace it, I wouldn't personally take it out. But that's just my opinion.
Do we have any idea how long it'll be till Rolf gets back to us?
I don't think it's going to be too long of a time. We had a conference about it at the end of last week, so.
And there's another one coming up in 2 weeks.
Well, I guess where I'm at is, we've waited this long, we've made really good progress, but I think when we give this out, it ought to be complete. I don't want to give out a new employee handbook to employees only to go 2 months later and say, oh, by the way, that's no good anymore, we've added this. I think we've waited this long, another month ain't gonna kill us. I think, you know, we've done everything we could to get this updated and as thorough as possible. I personally would rather wait and complete it in one time.
Seeing signs of agreement here.
Wouldn't hurt to wait.
I don't think there's any harm in waiting right now to have this as a complete work.
Yeah, the heavy lifting is done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So that'll be our plan of action. Okay, we'll get our input
Well,
there, and
It wouldn't
We'll
be a
do that.
month until we voted to move on this. It would be at least a month or two until we came up with a resolution to amend the existing policy if that is required. And then we would have to add it to the HAM. So I mean, we're actually pushing this off at least to probably 3 to 4 months.
yeah, the timeline I'm looking at is as long as we're voting on this in probably about November, we're okay.
I would think November would be your latest. I think you get it done in October.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. So
I mean,
we're not
technically,
too
you could get
close.
it done in 2 weeks on September 11th, but
No.
but that wouldn't have the changes. But what I'm saying is this is ripe for action, just depending on when you want to do that.
All right, well, let's get our input, and let's plan on putting on the October agenda. And if we don't have it ready, we'll need to address it at our work session prior to that. But I would expect that we'll,
This is not going to be printed, right? This is going to be available just electronically, correct?
I would think so. I mean,
Right.
it will,
I didn't hear the question.
she asked if it would be printed or if it would be electronic. I mean,
It would probably be available in both forms.
yeah, I would expect there may be like probably one copy here, paper, but probably not very many.
Well, during our orientation for employees, I do make a copy of the employee handbook, and they do sign a form stating that they've read it and understand the policies within it. So they do take one home.
So you
with
do
them.
hand a physical copy?
I do.
Okay, I
thank
wasn't
you,
sure.
Karen.
That's a lot of places. That's
What is your, I'm curious what our HR person thinks in terms of waiting or amending it.
I mean, I would err on the side of caution as far as what our labor attorneys have told us, so it wouldn't hurt waiting, just to make sure we have a complete policy that won't put us in any binds during litigation.
Okay, thank you.
all right. So,
Could we publicly
yes.
thank Kara again for her time? I remember at your employment interview when, oh, by the way, we said at the end of the interview, there's going to be a manual rewriting, by the way, and you still stayed in the room and stuck with it. So we appreciate your time that you put into this.
Thank you.
Well, I do think it does reflect, and we've discussed the need to revisit this document on a more regular basis, and we discussed that timeline kind of corresponding with our collective bargaining agreements, just so that we know it's on a regular cycle and it does not get into this kind of space where it's so incredibly outdated.
Yeah, the last time this was reviewed, I believe, was 2009.
Say 9 sticks in my mind.
Yeah, there it is, July of '09.
Yeah. They were on a good schedule. All right. Okay, so I think that takes us then on to the leaf vacuum truck. Mr. Harbaugh.
Good evening. So we actually started with the recycling, looking into a recycling grant for a leaf vac truck, and this was actually one of the capital improvement plan first project in 2021. We've been working with that, and we finally submitted the grant. 2021 we budgeted money for it. 22 we budgeted money for it, and 23 we kept it the same. And now with the price increases, the matching part of the grant has going up to $140,767 matching. And currently right now we have $77,000. So we need roughly $64,000 of matching grant for and we got the grant in March or April of 23 for $300,000. So it's basically, it's a 70-30 match grant. So basically our upping the matching part is still at 30%. And DEP is 70%.
Okay, so the total cost of the piece of equipment has of course risen. The borough's cost is increasing if we were to pursue this, but we remain at that 70%, 30% threshold. So for each dollar that we're spending, roughly 70 cents is being grant funds.
We're kind of looking for, I'm kind of looking for a direction on where to go till we can get the chassis locked in. If we get it locked in now, we probably won't see the chassis till late 24 or early 25.
So from a budgetary perspective, to lock this price in, we would need council's authorization to pursue this purchase this year, so that we can essentially put down payment on the vehicle and lock this price in. We do have the funds to do it. If you remember, we have a fairly large, robust amount of money sitting over in our capital reserve fund at the moment.
Thoughts?
Prices are just going to continue to go up, so I say we lock it in.
Definitely some truth in that.
Yep.
Are they gonna lock in the chassis price for you?
Not 100% on that. There could be a couple more increases on that, but they're not going to be drastic increases. So we have, if we don't get the truck till 2025, we have room to budget in 2025 for that.
The reason I ask is because the truck motors are gonna all change first of the year.
Correct.
And they're going up, just the exhaust system alone is gonna go up roughly between $35,000 and $50,000. Depending on your manufacturer and depending on their supplies, if they run out of the current ones that meet EPA, they have to be in frame by January 1st, 2026. And I know you're hoping to get a chassis by 2025, but if you want to guarantee your chassis by 2025, you better be ordering tomorrow.
Right.
So, yeah, I think we should move forward because, and hope that we get a guaranteed price.
Right.
Because that's not really in the trucking industry's domain right now. They give you a price good for 30 days.
Yep. All right. Other thoughts? I mean, I agree with what's said. We've all seen prices increase, and the fire department was here talking about the price of that engine, and that was when they mentioned that was signed in December of 2021. Yeah, I imagine it would be much more expensive right now, even though they don't have it yet.
That engine today is $1 million.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of a specialty market, but everything is like that right now. So, will that appear then on the
Yeah.
September?
We'll put a motion on September agenda.
Okay, agenda. But yeah, sounds like we're gonna go ahead and let's get that set
I
up.
do have a question for
Yes.
Mr. Harbaugh, though.
Question, yes.
The current leaf machine, is there anything that we do with that?
So
When the new one appears, can it be sold or?
So the current leaf machine that we do use now is actually our street sweeper. It takes 3 people to run that street, to collect leaves with the street sweeper. Takes the driver, the guy on the tube, and a guy raking if need be, because the piles are so back far off the curb, we can't reach it with the hose.
Yeah.
This new vehicle will be one-man operation, be remote controlled from in the cab, and the boom will extend out and the hose will drop down, and we can reach back further off the curb with this now. So we should be a 1-person operation versus a 3-person operation.
Okay, but I think what she's trying to get at is how this affect your fleet overall.
Well, we are gonna get rid of a vehicle, yes, a dump truck. We're gonna get rid of a dump truck for that.
But you'd still utilize the existing machinery as a street sweeper.
Right.
Okay, but the fleet's not growing.
Fleet's not growing. It's gonna be we're gonna be at the same. We're gonna get rid of one to get one.
She asked it, so I didn't have to. I've always asked that. The fleet never shrunk. All right. Any other questions or comments about the vacuum truck? Okay, that takes us to management of public spaces. Mr. Gable, Ms. Marshall.
So I'll just tee this up real quick. This is a PBS that was started way back a long time ago, 2016. Deals with sidewalks, the borough's management of certain spaces within the public right-of-way. As we all are aware, some of our sidewalks throughout the borough are in atrocious condition and create very clear and present safety hazards for our walking pedestrians and in some cases bicyclists. Certainly a lot of them are not ADA compliant, which we spoke about at CDBG hearing earlier, where we are addressing ADA crosswalks. So it is the hope that we can finally get to a position where we strategically and holistically deal with the sidewalk challenges faced here in the borough. And this is a multi-prong approach. It's not just about sidewalks, it's about management of public spaces and rights of way, kind of all put together in one big package, if you will. So with that, I will turn it over to Planning Director Marshall.
So we, as a part of this project, we're looking at a resolution that would clearly define and be accessible by the public the borough's longstanding policy of managing and maintaining the square. Obviously updating the sidewalk ordinance that's been in progress for several years. And also, we'd like to discuss with you the option of some cost-sharing measures that we could take, and even possibly some funding measures to help people repair some of their heaved sidewalks, or damaged sidewalks. So the ordinance the ordinance. Chad and I have actually been going back and forth a lot. Admittedly, neither of us have picked up the draft ordinance in probably, since the year that we talked about it last, and we're discovering that there's a lot of things that we've found that could probably improve the current draft and Chad also, I think, needs to refamiliarize himself with it, so I'm sending him the draft for full review and comment prior to presenting it, just to make sure that what we're presenting we don't have to re-present. And so next workshop, I propose not only presenting what would have changed from the last time you saw it, but what's everything that's changing from the current ordinance for all of those who haven't been following this since 2016. So you can see exactly what's changing and what's proposed. But one of the components of that is we would like to reference the policy about the management of the square, and right now that's a policy, and so it's not something that it doesn't have the resolution number. It's not searchable. It's just something that's on file in the borough. So we're proposing an actual resolution that would include the existing policy, somewhat enhanced, to cover essentially what we've been doing all of these years. maintaining the square, managing the activities on the square, managing the landscaping, and everything else, special events, and making that accessible to the public, and then of course being able to cross-reference that with the sidewalk ordinance, so that there isn't confusion between how the linear sidewalks are treated versus the square, which is different. So just to make sure that that's clarified and the public has access to all of that information. So I did propose a draft resolution. I'm sure that there's probably some work that Harry might want to do on this, but it talks about the existing conditions on the square, including the landscaping, the flagpole, the light fixtures, flower beds, and then the policy of additional structures, displays, activities, and the ability of the borough to manage all of the aforementioned. So, I don't know, Charles, do you have anything that you want to add about the resolution?
No, not really. This is just further clarifies the intent of the policy that the council passed several years ago.
I was going to say, it's almost, if it's not the same language, it's very similar.
It's a little more expansive in that that policy only talks about the center circle. This is talking about the entire public space.
Yeah, by way of kind of history of that, the concern at that time was that we had people going into the center circle of the square to place things and so forth, and it created a public safety hazard. So there was a rather quick movement by the borough council at that time to essentially prohibit that activity. Just so, because there are no crosswalks into the center circle, there are no, reasonable access points, while preserving the activities, for instance, of the garden club and the work that they do for the borough.
Right. Garma also.
Garma,
well.
the retail merchants with the activities in that area.
So, the language of the existing policy, even though it really only talked about the center of the square, the very center of the square, it applies really to how we treat the entire square. With the exception of crossing over and the safety issue, the square has been maintained and managed by the borough. For recent, at least
hundreds of years.
Yeah.
For more than 200
I wouldn't
years.
even say recent history, but that's how it's always been. So, making sure that that's clear.
Since there was a borough.
Right.
Go out to the museum and see the
March
the
10th,
hide.
1806.
Any questions about the resolution?
Any questions?
I had a question.
Go ahead, Patty.
Yes, Ms. Lawson, go ahead.
How would this impact restaurants that currently have seating on the square, Ms. Marshall?
So the resolution essentially stating that the borough has the right to manage and permit activities, and so we would continue to run our permitting and licensing programs as we have. They would still, of course, be required to get a permit. The borough would still be able to issue that permit.
Okay. And there'll be attention paid to like ADA compliance issues as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's been an issue over the years in determining, for instance, it'll come up with the sidewalk ordinance, you're required to have
Sure.
your width, and the question sometimes will become, well, where's that located? Particularly when you
Right.
get to pinch points related to outdoor dining in particular.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Carr, you had a question.
Just about when you're talking about damaged sidewalks and the idea of working with the owners. Right, that is not the square, that's
Right.
elsewhere, because
Right.
the square is the
The borough
borough
already
property,
repairs the
not,
square.
not the responsibility of the property owner.
Correct. Correct. The
But
square
for-
is not the responsibility of the adjacent property owners.
Because the
It is-
borough shovels that snow and cleans up that trash.
That is correct.
So if there's damage with that area that pedestrians are walking, that is the borough's responsibility to fix. Not the property owner on the streets adjacent coming into the square.
Correct.
Yeah,
Right.
so like a
The
traditional.
property owner on
yeah.
on the streets coming in, it is their responsibility. The borough square is the borough's responsibility.
Yeah, the square is the square, and then with a normal piece of property, you own the area where your sidewalk is constructed, and you're responsible by ordinance to maintain it. Really why this is, it just continues to circle around and has for so incredibly long, before I was here, is what it comes down to is we have sidewalks in the borough that are not, it's not my judgment that they're unacceptable. They're unacceptable by judgment of ADA laws and things of that nature. They're just not safe, and we've had people fall. We've had people be injured. And what it comes down to is that it's not a very popular thing to tell people that, hey, you have to fix your sidewalk or we'll fine you. So every time that the council, over probably 15 years or longer, John can speak better to that, gets to that point, there's always a grand hesitation and then lack of action because you're talking about saddling someone with a major bill. I had Kinsley give me a number when they did, maybe one square in front of my house for when they were doing the project there on Stratton Street. And I think that number was $7,000 or $8,000, and I said, okay, I'm not doing that right now, because like a lot of folks, I don't necessarily have $7,000 or $8,000 just to lay out at one moment. And I think that's part of what Ms. Marshall's identifying here with, the loan program that was discussed at one time, the old Kenny's money and using that. The issue of doing that is if you run such a large number of loans, you have to be concerned about the workload that comes associated with that, and having that many people borrowing money. But the in-between, which was really not great, was 2013, 2014, when the company came in and said, oh, it's fine, we'll just grind your sidewalk down, and tried to sell that to the people. And it was really a cost, or probably a money-making effort on their part. But what you end up with is a dramatically thinner piece of sidewalk, which usually cracks and breaks off anyway, when you probably should have just done it the right way the first time. It is difficult because I can't go down to the rental center, rent some equipment, tear it out. I can do that part, but I can't just go buy Quickcrete and put it back in. It has to meet standards with the PSI and so forth that Robbie could, or Chad, or the gentleman here could probably explain better than I could, but yeah, I'm not able to just do that. If I could, I probably would have by now. So.
Could we clarify, does the sidewalk end at the curb, or does it end where the curb meets the road?
So the property owner is responsible by our ordinance for the sidewalk and the curb, although the curbs are often maintained with street work, but technically the property owner is responsible for the sidewalk and curb. And then between the curb and the road is the borough's responsibility. Like if there's a crack with a weed between,
weeds, where
yeah.
I'm going with this.
Face of curb.
So
Yeah.
the weeds and the cracks going to the curb.
Those
should
are
be
us.
The sidewalk, or the owner. And then down the curb where it's touching the road and the weeds
Oh, right, yeah,
are,
okay, I see what you're saying,
according
yeah.
to a former public works director, damaging the asphalt.
Is the borough.
It's the borough.
Yep, the weeds between the curb and the sidewalk are the responsibility of the property owner.
On streets, not the borough square.
Correct.
Just making sure we're clear. And along with that, if I may for a moment more, in going forward on this, and I'm sure you will, any resolution or motion that is to be made, can we make sure that they are separate so that we do not have the confusion of what is the square and what is the sidewalk?
Yeah,
Just the square is the square. Yeah.
The
Just
square
wanted
is
to
the
make
square.
sure
Yes.
that they are separate.
Yes.
Yeah, right. It's like no different than if someone has a concrete driveway, right? The part between
It only
where you
crosses
walk
in.
in their house isn't a sidewalk just because it's made of concrete.
Yep.
But I can tell you the planning commission at that time, probably around 16, 17, they were walking the streets. This issue, when it comes into ordinance form, you're going to find that it's fairly complex because of lots of issues that just come up with things like planting strips, neighborhoods that were built in ways that may or may not allow for that 60 inches for two people to pass every 150 feet, something like that. Whatever distance it is, there came the question, well, who's responsible for making sure that exists? Right, if so-and-so happens to have a driveway here in Colt Park and you can pass here, are they compelled to maintain that as a, level, flat surface because of that? It's not simple, unfortunately. And the downtown, of course, as we've seen over the years, is really difficult because of the historic nature of the town and just how it's built.
I didn't have a chance to read this. Did we get into whether or not we're going to allow monolithic pours for curbs and sidewalks?
I'm sorry, we were gonna allow, so I didn't, that would be a part of either the specs or the sidewalk ordinance, which we're sending that back through CS Davidson before we bring it to council, but I can make a note of that for Chad's review.
Well, it used to be separate, that you couldn't do a monolithic pour,
Okay.
curb and sidewalk, and the reason was pretty simple. Sometimes with snow removal, the borough damages occur. It happens. If it's monolithic pour, the cost to replace that curb is like 3-4 times the amount, because now you're back into the sidewalk. And so therefore, I would recommend that we do not allow monolithic pours anymore. I understand some engineering firms have in their specs that they are allowed. I understand townships have it. But we're a borough, we're a completely different animal. And I would be opposed to monolithic pours in the borough.
Okay.
As far as I know, our specs we don't do monolithic pours, so.
Yeah, I don't think CS Davidson's do, but some other ones do.
Yep.
Okay.
And depending who hires who to do what work in the borough, it creates an argument.
Yep. Usually we write our specs so we don't allow a monolithic pour.
Well, I think we need to call that out in our ordinance so that we don't have the arguments with people who hire other engineering firms and want to do a monolithic pour, because there's no argument, it's cheaper. Because it's one pour and you don't have to do separate forming.
Right.
But here again, do it right the first time, you don't have the problem the second time.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about potential sidewalk repair program. The evaluation that a contractor did in 2014 was referenced, where they went through the borough and identified all of the heaves and anything that they felt that they could repair by grinding the sidewalks. They provided a quote at the time there were a lot of sidewalks that they couldn't repair through grinding, by the way, so this was only things that could be done by grinding. They provided a quote of $90,000, and the plan at the time was to have that economy of scale, have them come and repair them all, and then invoice the property owners, and then for reasons that you all stated and the cost, that was not pursued. And the state of the sidewalks in general, other than a few streets that we've had street projects on, haven't improved. So we've been talking about some potential cost sharing programs where, for example, and this would be limited due to staff limitations, but the borough could, by application, remove the old sidewalks or the gravel, and then schedule with the contractor that the property owner would be responsible for the cost for the concrete. So what it would look like would be, we would have an application timeline and identify properties that are in close proximity to each other, and the borough would remove the old sidewalk for the gravel, and then the property owner would pay for the concrete work, and so they would get some cost benefit both from us doing the removal and the gravel, and a contractor handling, and the economy of scale of the concrete work. We would probably have to be the ones scheduling the contractor and do it by reimbursement, just so that you don't have gravel patches laying open for extended period of time. And so we would want them, you know, for our costs and theirs close together, and probably maybe open it up to targeted areas. There are also some municipalities who, they go down their capital improvement plan for street improvements, and the year before a street project is proposed to be resurfaced or any other work on that street, they let all the property owners who have damaged sidewalks, they give them a warning a year in advance. If the sidewalk is repaired before the street work is done, great. If not, the repair is made while the street work is happening. You could use a similar formula with cost sharing or not, and then the property owner would be invoiced, and any unpaid invoices would result in a lien. So those are without financial incentives. Those would be some cost sharing measures where, again, the cost would be lower because of, you know, the borough doing some of the work and the economy of scale of doing all of the sidewalks or all of the damage repairs at once in an area. Could also use a revolving loan, and we would have to fund that because a lot of that had been spent during for the COVID loans, but that's an option too. We could use the revolving loan funds for sidewalk repairs, and we would of course want to come up with parameters for that. And then another option could also be for you know, small mini grants for sidewalk repairs under certain conditions, such as the damage was caused by a tree, maybe the property may be owner-occupied residential. Whether or not I would not consider any of these financial incentives for streets where there's street or sidewalk improvements planned within the area over the next 5 years, so that we're not spending money on something that gets torn up. And even with a financial incentive, we're limited in staff in the amount of sidewalks we'd be able to repair in a year. So I don't anticipate, you know, a huge number of streets and sidewalks being repaired through a program like this in 1 year, but it could, you know, add a carrot, so to speak, to help people, especially. And again, we do get a lot of complaints about sidewalk damage that's caused by street trees, so it could help ease that that cost a little bit.
Mr. Harbaugh and I were discussing this about 6-8 months ago, and we were sort of scratching our heads, if you remember, about where that line exists, if it even exists, as to who's responsible if the sidewalk heaves, you know, if in, like, so for example, I had a neighbor who had a Bartlett pear in the planting strip. It came down in a windstorm, and it buckled the sidewalk, and the borough came and removed the tree, but nothing was ever done to address the sidewalk. So I think the conclusion we came to is, in a situation like that, we already would concede that that's the borough's responsibility. But it doesn't necessarily seem that we have a mechanism in place for identifying those and repairing them. Is that the case? Am I misunderstanding? Am I misrepresenting?
No, we don't have a mechanism.
But would you agree that currently, if a sidewalk is damaged by a tree, you know, falling over or something, is that our responsibility?
It didn't used to be.
Yeah, I think that's something, I mean, technically by the ordinance, it's not our I mean, we could, you know, personal opinion aside, that's not, by the ordinance, that's not the borough's responsibility. And
well, I think there's a weird overlap here where we're encouraging property owners to pursue trees in the planting strip through the Shade Tree Commission, and we'll pay for the tree, but if it damages the sidewalk, that's your fault now? Like, I mean, that's a hard thing, I think, for a property owner to swallow there, don't you think?
it is. It's not an uncommon scenario. It's, I think, throughout most if not all boroughs and cities in Pennsylvania, that is the case. Is the property owner's responsibility. Maybe not all cities. we actually, I think it was Susan Ogle had said that she spoke with Carlisle, and they don't have any financial assistance when they, you know, regardless of what the damage is, whether it's for a tree or something else, if your sidewalk heaves, you get a notice, you have to fix it. If you don't, they fix it and they bill you for it. So, but I think to your point, you know, there's a lot of personal sentiment in general, and also public sentiment that the borough could help mitigate some of those costs.
Well, when the shade tree and the tree planting started, it was understood that after we planted the tree, it was your tree. So the assistance was to get trees out there, and you didn't have to break the concrete, you didn't have to haul the concrete away, you didn't have to haul the topsoil in, because the borough did that. But after that tree was planted, it was your tree. Just like the trimming of it, you're responsible for trimming that tree. So if the tree comes down in a storm, and unfortunately, we did plant a lot of Bradford pears, which are very susceptible to wind, and we had a lot of tree damage in the beginning of that program when we didn't know any better as to what type of trees to plant. And this came up a lot. And back in those days, you owned the tree, so if it damaged your sidewalk, I'm sorry, but it's your sidewalk because it's your tree. So I understand what you're saying, it's kind of a gray area, but when I was working the programs, it was pretty black and white to me.
Well, and I think it gets even grayer when you consider that we are currently maintaining those trees if they're in the public right of way, right?
We used to only trim for height clearances above the street, and then we got into trimming above the sidewalks, which we shouldn't have, but we did. That decision was made by prior councils. But we trimmed basically from the curb, the edge of the curb straight up to get clearances because we paid for some air conditioners and on trucks and things like that because we didn't maintain what our ordinance required, which was 15 feet at the time. So that's when we got into trimming on the street, and then the argument became, well, the ordinance says it's gotta be 7 or 8 feet above the sidewalk, so we should be trimming that too. And the highway superintendent at that time argued, but he lost that argument due to politics. Because here again, the highway superintendent at that time said it's your tree, you're responsible for that clearance. Doesn't matter if it's a tree or a bush growing out over the sidewalk, you have to maintain that clearance. That's what the ordinance says, and it's property owner's responsibility. It's not the borough's.
When those are planted today, are those planted in a like a cylinder of types to contain the root system, or?
So we plant, when we plant a tree, we put a root barrier around it.
Yeah, that's what, like
18 inch, could be round, could be square, depending on how.
But it's meant for that purpose, right? Because that's the one thing I see that.
It's meant to make the roots grow down.
Yeah, when
Before they go out.
Or they go out.
Yeah, when you walk down a sidewalk and you see I don't have to be an engineer or archaeologist to figure out that the tree brought the sidewalk up. The tree root system.
Right. Yeah, so that treatment that we use now, we did not always use that. And
Right.
so,
Oh, I know, but I'm talking like what we do now is we do install
Right.
that. So we shouldn't be creating future problems of that particular type.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
We're taking steps to avoid it.
Right.
Right, but it's not 100%.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
Well, I would certainly champion a cost-sharing measure. I'll tell you, I have a single square of sidewalk that I need to replace. And if I opened the door and Pete was standing there with a citation saying, you need to replace this in X amount of time and it's going to cost you $7,000, I don't know that I could comply. I don't know if I could. I might just end up paying the fine, you know, and then seeing how far that goes. I mean, honestly, I don't think I'm alone in the borough as being somebody who would not be able to easily or readily absorb that expense. So if there is a way that the borough can help mitigate that, I think we have an obligation to do that.
Well, I'm in favor of the revolving loan program, and I'm in favor of doing work when we're doing major street work. The idea that we're gonna go in and remove concrete and provide stones, because Joe Smith is gonna replace his sidewalk this year, and his contractor can only come in June, and 3 doors down, they hired another contractor, and he can only come in August. I think we're putting a hell of a burden on the highway department, because they have a year's worth of work as it is.
Yeah.
And I think scheduling is gonna be a royal pain in the butt. I just don't think that, I'm not saying that we couldn't do it, but we used to have a 10-man highway crew. We no longer have a 10-man highway crew. And things used to be a lot more versatile. Now, we used to pave our own streets. We don't do that anymore because we don't have a 10-man highway crew. And, you know, the argument that it doesn't cost money for Robbie's crew to do that, that doesn't hold water with me, because it does cost money. You know, I understand it's taxpayers' money and we're working for the taxpayer, but we're not working for all taxpayers. We're only working for a few that have bad sidewalk. Well, in this case, more than a few, but my point being, it does cost money. I'm all in favor of, you know, I've preached this before. When we go in and do a full block of restoration to a street, if the property owners want to get together and they want us to handle it, we could easily contract that out, have a contractor come in, and we could take that out, and there is a lot of cost savings to that. And that goes in with a street project. But that is wholeheartedly different from individual properties. And that's why I would be opposed to the individual property scenario. The revolving loan, I've backed that before, I would back it again. Going and doing sidewalk work with street work, I've backed that before, I would back that again. The individual ones, can't get my vote for that. Not gonna happen.
We would, I mean, and Robbie's expressed the same concerns. If we were to pursue something like that, we would require that they all be scheduled together for that reason, because Robbie has to stage the concrete, whoever's doing concrete has to stage, and if they don't want to use that contractor, and if they don't want to do it that time, then they would be responsible for the full replacement on their own without borough involvement.
I just think you get 3 or 4 property owners, you get at least 2 contractors, and I think you have a nightmare. Because they all agree to it, but then contractor A says, I'll be there Monday morning, contractor B says, yeah, that'll work for me, I'll be there Monday morning, and then Monday morning shows up and only one contractor, or maybe no contractors show up, but Robbie shows up, he's ripped the sidewalk out, and the stone's there, and now we have an open sidewalk until the contractors show up. But because we didn't hire the contractor, we have no leverage over them. We can't beat them with a stick and say, you gotta get here, or you're gonna pay a fee for not being on schedule. So I don't think, and it's not about being a control freak, it's just a matter of timing and logistics. And in order for Robbie's crew to maintain the timing and logistics, they have to have control of it. And when you're using individual contractors, you lost that.
So if we did hire the contractor,
Well, like I said, we've done this before. Didn't the people on Broadway, didn't they all go together and use the same contractor, Robbie? For sidewalks?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
they billed individually, and it
Yes.
worked out.
yeah.
And when we do a street, now often it's been Columbia actually doing sidewalk work, but you know,
One contractor.
but yeah, in my case, it was like, hey, here's your choice, because yeah, you can't have really more than one operating because of everything else that's going on.
Right.
I would concur. If we're doing a street, that's the moment. You know, I mean, some people, I thought about it actively, but not everybody necessarily will. It is the right moment to knock on the door. You know, if you're on the fortunate side of the street, which I was not, right, and Columbia's going to pay to do some of your sidewalk work, that's great, but it's, you know, it'd be nice to knock on everyone else's door and say, hey, now's your time. If you'd like to do this, they can give you a number.
Right.
Because there is really an economy of scale there. But if we get into a scenario where there's not street work going on, one of the questions I think we have to figure out is, you know, you'd have to have almost some sort of bid process and what that would even look like. You know, because you're talking about, I know it's all concrete work, but it could really vary in how many linear feet. I mean, you know, that'd be probably something to talk through with Chad, because there's gonna be, you know, maybe a mobilization component and then a
Yep.
linear feet component, but
Yeah.
I mean, that's what makes it cheaper, because I agree, like, you can't have, and Robbie's crew is, you know, the public works crew, we often think about this with different things, different employees, you know, like, well, this is already paid for. Well, if they're doing this, there's something they're not doing.
Right, yeah.
And that's really something to keep in mind. I know you talked about this being on a smaller scale. That's something that always is present in my mind when we talk about, oh, well, we could just get these folks to do this. Well, what were they doing before, and what's not happening now as a result? I don't want to put them, you know, too far behind on things or create a situation where we lose service.
And the other thing we have to keep in mind with Robbie's crew all the time is the fact that emergencies happen. Whether it's storm, flood, you know, it doesn't matter. Who's first people we call? First department called out is always highway department. Could be a bad storm, all of a sudden we got traffic lights out because we lost electric. Who's got to go out and set up generators for signals? Highway department. Trees come down, fall across the street, who do we call? Highway department. Nobody thinks of them as an emergency service, but in this town, they really are an emergency service. And so, you know, the time that will be spent trying to do individual projects, I just don't think that's in their bailiwick anymore. Do you even have a concrete guy anymore?
We have a few. They're small contractors.
No, I mean on staff.
On staff now.
'Cause I mean, Ralph Carey was the last one that was here and he's dead now.
Well, Ron Rosenstiel was after him, but Ron's retired now too.
So we can't even go in, really, we can't even go in if the contractor wouldn't show up. Say something happened, he's not gonna show up for a month, we couldn't even go in and pour the concrete. We'd have to go out and hire a contractor. And because of the bidding process, unless we bid one at the beginning of the year that would be at our mercy, we'd have no way to fill that up if the private contractor failed.
Well, in theory, like, we would be the ones contracting with them, so we would hope that we would know that they weren't coming, so that we would know not to dig up the sidewalk. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So we'll refine this and bring it back to you next month.
Okay. All right, any other discussion items under management of public space? Under that, we had discussed at the meeting revisiting the large vehicle, but it did not appear on the agenda here separately. Is the sentiment to run out, when's the 90 days of the?
About 6 weeks.
How far are we in?
The last 5 weeks.
I don't remember the exact date.
I think we're about halfway through.
I think we're a little more than halfway through, so it might be most appropriate to revisit that at that time.
It would be October 8th.
Chad, you had raised this, is that?
I wanted to hear more, we did not have a complete council at that meeting, and I thought it would behoove the council and the public to hear from council, their thoughts on it. But it would be, the pilot would end October 8th. So I don't know if we wanna open that up for discussion, cause it's not on the agenda, but there were council members that were not here at that meeting, and it's having to do with the oversized vehicle parking, and most of the discussion was very much bus parking, and after receiving some info from staff, and I appreciate them getting back to me on that, yes, it was actually mentioned, and it was actually stated that it's not just oversized bus parking, it would include campers. But I think the bulk of our discussion amongst council at many work sessions was bus parking, because the issue came about with tour buses coming through, stopping traffic to unload and to local restaurants, and you know, and where can they park, you know, because Pickett's is closed and there's no parking there anymore, blah, blah, blah. So at any rate, it's now a pilot program that was a little bit different than I anticipated it being, but again, it ends in October, not too far away, October 8th. But some council members weren't here, so
Right.
I didn't know what their thoughts on that was. Because now we have some campers that are using the oversized parking, which is fine, they're paying for it, but that, I think the whole premise of the pilot program was, it was a tourist thing of tourists that are coming in large passenger buses, coming to downtown and unloading safely and having somewhere safe to park. To me, that was the reason to even try a pilot program. Campers being pulled, you know, a truck with a camper behind it, while I appreciate that they're coming and visiting our town, that wasn't exactly my thought of a bus parking permit pilot program.
But wasn't there some legal advice on this, that we had to expand it, that we could not keep it narrow?
So there were items raised at that meeting related to the definition of a bus and, you know, anything essentially more than 15 passengers. And, you know, I think that we're at a spot now where, with this expiring in early October, that I just think it's prudent that the council be aware that it was adopted as a large vehicle pilot program, and that you probably want to start to formulate some opinions about whether you would desire to remain that way, or you would desire to become more specific perhaps to a bus program if you were to move that forward from a pilot to permanent, or perhaps another pilot at some point. But it's something you want to keep in your mind, and if we need to seek advice about, you know, how various vehicles are defined, you need to ask for that. Okay.
And it would be contemplated that if you move past the pilot program, it would become part of a ordinance that the council would enact.
And Carly and I were saying earlier to each other that an advantage of a pilot program is you learn. You install it and
Right.
bingo, you learn something you hadn't thought of. And we were thinking only buses, but suddenly other types of vehicles are using it. That's what we learned from it being a pilot, and now we can move on from that.
So I'd say let's see what we learn here over the next 6 weeks or so. And then when that discussion comes up, you know, I think that's part of what the discussion has to be, and we need to have, certainly, I think the definition of a bus, but if there are any other, you know, contemplating any other factors that may influence what definition is used, whether it's within an ordinance or within the motor vehicle code. And perhaps Chief Glenny can give us some insight there too. He was helpful.
Yeah, I also sent Chief an email to get some more data and some about state law in regarding bus idling, because I know that's been a question and a concern raised in public comment. There may be something that we're not even addressing that is already in a law that we can now point to.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that they can write them for idling. I think the issue is how many police officers you have available to do that.
Yeah.
It's
right.
also what idling is. It's 5 minutes, but it's for different buses. It could be 15 minutes, and then it goes into different circumstances. So yes, that is a good question for Chief.
So yeah, I'm sure he'll get back to us, and yeah, it's just but yes, then you have to have somebody out
Like,
there.
I don't think we have the staffing to have someone sit on a bus. I really don't. I would never agree that we do.
I think if we get to October and review it and we don't have enough data, I think we should extend the pilot program too. That's another thing for us to think about.
Yeah, that's certainly an option. So when we talked about, you know, any alterations, right, the expenses essentially come in signage and the resolution. So
yeah,
those are the things to consider. We can look at that at that time. Okay. All right, anything else before we go to public comment? Okay, if not, we'll go to public comment. Again, please state your name and address, use the podium. Please limit your remarks to 5 minutes. This is our open session.
Hi, Shelley Nouse, 28 Chambersburg Street. I didn't know we were having this discussion about sidewalks, but I have lots of questions from just what I heard tonight. Since you're going to be working on the revisions, I did look at that earlier this week, and just from what I heard tonight is what I read in the ordinance. It's very confusing from what I've heard. So one thing that I would ask that it would be looked at is in Lincoln Square. If I was a property owner in Lincoln Square, the way I understand property in town is that that sidewalk abutting my property would be my responsibility. So if it's not the property owner's responsibility that has a property, for example, like Blue and Gray, I think they're repairing their sidewalk against their building right now. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I would make sure that that's clear. I know I have a tree in front of my property, so when you said that's my responsibility, I've already been told I'm not allowed to trim it. So I think it's confusing if that's now my tree. It was there before, so I guess I got it with the property. If they're our responsibility, then I think we should have a say in whether they stay or whether they go as a property owner. The church had asked me to go to the Shade Tree Commission that's right beside me last week, and they were going to put a tree in their concrete that had just been replaced in 2019, and they spent $100,000 on it, and it was a 2-to-1 vote. And I asked the member, what would you have done if it would have went 2-to-1 that you'd had to plan it? And they're like, I don't know, because the way I understood that meeting is they could put that tree in there without your permission. So if it is our sidewalk, and it's our responsibility to maintain it, I think that needs to be clearly defined in the ordinance, because right now it's not. I'm not pointing any fingers, but Wes, you said it's our sidewalk, our responsibility, our liability. When I first purchased my property, somebody tripped on the sidewalk, and I was told I would be sued, but then at the same time, I'm not supposed to do anything with the tree. And then also, like, Garma can rent the sidewalk for, events. So now people can rent the sidewalk that's your sidewalk. So then if there's an accident while an event's taking place on your sidewalk, is it my liability, the event's liability, the borough's liability? So I just would make sure all of that stuff's very, very clear and spelled out to the residents, because I think most residents right now are not really sure. And back to the Lincoln Square, like I'm saying, is it to the actual building foundation that's the borough's responsibility? So that means replacing sidewalk to the foundation of a building, or is it just like where the brickwork is? So I don't know that that's even clear in the ordinance. I'm just asking that all of those things maybe be cleared up for property owners.
All right. Public comment?
Good evening. My name is Nancy Goodnestead. I own the Shriver House Museum at 309 Baltimore Street, and next door is our Shriver House Museum shop at 307 Baltimore Street, where I also live with my husband, Dal. And I'm here to talk about the buses. And, I think, like Patty said, if this doesn't work out, then they would extend it. I think you're really choosing the most non-beneficial time of year to be able to test this. Back between mid-March and mid-June, I had over 200 buses come to the Shriver House. In August, I have 2. In September, I have 11. In October, I do have 30, so it's a little bit better for a test. But then if you're not sure and you decide to expand it, in November, gosh, I might have 1 or 2. December, January, February, there aren't any buses here in town, so it's really not a great time to be testing for the buses. I have lived on Baltimore Street. I have had the Shriver House for over 27 years, and I've lived here for 40 years, and I can't count on one hand the number of RVs I have seen parked on the 300 block of Baltimore Street. So closing off the spaces in front of my house for RVs seems kind of silly because it isn't really very used. 2 weeks ago on a Sunday, I came home. I really wish I had taken a picture, but I did not. And I stood out front, and it doesn't happen all the time, but almost every single parking space on my side of the street and on the opposite side of the street, all the way down to South Street and all the way up into the top of the hill, every single space, maybe minus one or two, every single spot was taken. But 3 spaces in front of our house are gone. They took the meters away. 3 spaces in front of the Mayor and Sutler are gone. They took those away. So that's revenue lost to the borough. I saw in the newspaper that they said they made $108 between July 26th and August 12th. I'd really like to know, how much did you make the exact same days in 2022 on those exact same meters, since you can count them by meter. I just don't think that one size fits all. The parking issues on the 3rd block of Baltimore Street, which is me, and this is all selfish, are nothing like the parking issues around the square and up on the streets right off of the square. I was told that they cannot make different rules for different sections of town. However, if I were to park my car in front of my house, it would be $1.35 using the park app. On the square, the 1st block would be $1.85. On Lincoln Square, it would be $2.35. If it was a bus, it would be $3.35. So there are different rules for different areas of town, so I don't understand why the bus rules have to be the same for all around the town. The parking app, there are 12 people that work at the Shriver House. If I have to pay per bus, that means I have to buy a new piece of equipment that can be internet accessible to be able to put the app on there. Because I've already talked to my staff, they have no desire to put that parking app on their own phone. They don't use it and they don't want it on there. And even if they did, that means I have to give my credit card number to 12 different people. I don't want to give my credit card number to all those different people. Not that I don't trust them, but I just don't want to do that. I would probably have to have an additional employee. I tracked it, there were 20 days this year where I had more than 4 buses in a day. Now, a couple of those days were 10, 11 buses. And if I have to go outside every single time a bus pulls up, I can tell you right now, to go out on the bus, usually they're older gentlemen, and tell them, oh, just pay by the parking app. First off, they probably don't even know what an app is. I'm going to have to help them download it. They probably don't have a company credit card. So first, I'm not going to do that. So that means I'm going to pay that. That means for every single bus that comes, my staff is full of, we really pay attention to our buses. We are with them the entire time they're at the Shriver House. We don't let the kids run around. We are there to greet them when they get off the bus. We're there with them the entire time during the tour. We walk them back to the bus at the end of the tour to make sure they get on, everything's okay. And then we take the meter bags off immediately. So we don't let them run around. But they're busy doing that. But if I have to have another person who's going to go behind the bus to download the license number, and by the way, on the options for the vehicles, it says car, electric bike, truck, or motorcycle. It doesn't say RVs or buses. But I'm just assuming you would use a truck, and that's what I would do. But so if I'm doing 12 buses in a day, and a bus pulls up and parks there, and I pay the meter, but the next bus comes up kind of early, so I'm going to have 2 buses out front, which happens quite often, and I always just pay the meters down the street. That's fine. But so if that first bus moves up, I was told that I have to pay per license plate. So does that mean I now have to pay for that license plate on this one, but then go back down and feed the meter separately for that one when I've already paid for that one? Because I asked, if I do have 12 buses in a day, can I just pay the meters for the whole entire day? Because we're going to use them. I'm not making it up. We're going to be using them, and I'm telling you that. But I was told, no, it has to be per license plate. So I do have a lot of questions. I'd love to know if somebody could tell me how many requests has the borough had for RV parking? Is there a number? What is the percentage of total parking spaces in the borough for that? One of the nice things about doing buses,
conclude that.
Oh, okay, is that I can tell you next year, if you give me a date, I can tell you what time a bus is coming, how many people are going to be on it, and how long they're going to be there. It's not like they just pull up willy-nilly and park there. It's all done ahead of time. I probably have 22 more questions, and I won't go through them all, but thank you for your time. And the one thing I can say, I mentioned this at the last meeting, I've been in the tourist industry for almost 40 years. I started when I was 10, just so you know. So I've been doing this stuff for a long, long time, and it's not really your bailiwick, and I understand that, but I would be more than happy to sit down with y'all and talk about this and just kind of brainstorm and see if there's something that we can work out, something out together. Thank you very much. That's not my phone.
Public comment.
Good evening. I am Marcia Wilson. I do not reside in the borough, but I work at 307 Baltimore Street with Nancy, and I am a tenant down just off the square with another entity, and I'm a GARMA board member. So I spend a lot of time here in the borough, and I put a lot of money into the parking meters. So I am respectfully requesting that I be permitted to speak on the bus issue.
Oh, certainly. Can you give your address?
My home address is 386 Hill Road in Hanover, which is actually on the Adams County side.
Got it.
Okay, very good. Shriver House, we have a system. Nancy's been doing this for over 20 years. I've been there 13 years. We have 250 buses or more every year. We have multiple days where we have multiple buses. 90 of those 250, according to my calculations over the past year, back to back. That means we have a bus that comes in, we take care of those folks, and we get them back on their bus, and the next bus is already pulling in. What this pilot program is doing is not allowing us to have the number of spaces that we need when we have multiple buses. Many times our buses are arriving 45 minutes apart. That is very challenging for us. I'm going to go into other logistics momentarily, but we cannot dictate to those buses. Nancy could lose business if she told a bus company, no, you have to wait another 15 minutes to bring your people here because we don't have enough time. We make the adjustments necessary to serve those customers. If we do not have adequate time, then they're not going to get a good tour and we won't have repeat business, okay? Our logistics, we are organized. We are controlling those visitors. Everything is timed. And our primary concern is the safety of those visitors. Adding time requirements, as I said, might mean a loss of customers, and it absolutely would mean additional staff expenses. I've been standing on Baltimore Street for 13 years in front of the Shriver House, and I have seen my share of stupid driver tricks. U-turns, almost every single day. People coming out the wrong way on Breckenridge Street. People not paying attention to the speed limits. People not paying attention to pedestrians. It's dangerous. There is no way that we will permit a bus to disembark on the far side of the street and try to cross the street. You have 55 eighth graders or you have 55 senior citizens. Not a good situation. We have the bus come in right in front. One of us goes onto the bus, instructs the driver to turn off the engine. We take the people off in 2 or 3 groups, depending upon how many people in a group. Our guides are right there with their group. And we are with that group from the time they get off the bus until they get back on. Everything is controlled. Folks, please, 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 don't mess with success. And I thank you.
Public comment.
Hello, Max Felty with Gettysburg Tours, home address Cumberland Township, but own property on Baltimore Street. So just wanted to make myself available to you all. I know the pilot program is starting to come to an end. I own and operate a bus company. I also own and operate a tour operating business as well. So Gettysburg Group Reservations, we bring in thousands and thousands of student groups and adult groups into Gettysburg every year. And believe me, if you have questions on how to handle the buses with the drop off, the pickup, the parking, any of that kind of stuff, that's literally all I do every day. So as you're analyzing the program and there may be questions, you know, I wouldn't say I'm completely, you know, out of the picture as far as being involved in it, but that is literally what I do every day. So you have any questions as you're reviewing the data and you see what the effects are or could be on whatever you decide to do, please reach out. I would gladly help to make sure that not only the businesses but the borough have no negative effects on whatever the outcome would be for this, because it's it should be a win-win however it's handled at the end of the day. So thank you.
Public comment.
My name is Carl Peterzak. I also live in Cumberland Township at 6300s Trail, but I'm president of Destination Gettysburg. So as Max said, this is part of what we do every day. I first want to thank the council for putting the work in to try and make parking in the borough easier for the visitors and our businesses and residents. It's obviously from listening to comments that it's not an easy task and you're never going to make everybody happy, but I think it's a job worth doing. And I'll just echo what Max said. We have a lot of real experts in the tourism industry here in Gettysburg and Adams County, so if you're able to, I would encourage you to make use of their expertise. What I want to talk about is the bus group industry in general in Gettysburg. We see, before COVID, we were seeing over 10,000 bus groups a year coming to Gettysburg. That obviously declined through COVID. This year it's really rebounded, which I think is part of why this has become a topic and become more of a an issue, because there's a lot more buses in Gettysburg. Combine that with the fact that Pickett's closed, so not only do we lose several parking spaces in their parking lot, but that pushed all the bus groups that dined at Pickett's out into the borough and into the county to try and find other accommodations for eating. And if they're in the borough, the challenge is, how do you unload 30 or 50 passengers on our narrow streets when people are trying to get by? And it's just it's a challenge. Where Pickett's intended to reopen this year, they obviously didn't. Will they next year? I don't know, but if they do, I guess that could help to alleviate some of the congestion. However, we're hearing from tour operators that they expect to be fully back to pre-COVID levels of traveling next year. So even if we do get some relief from another outlet, I think we'll have more buses anyway. So I don't have a solution. I think this is something that definitely is worth talking about and worth finding spaces we can accommodate these buses. I will say, as much as I love our RV visitors, and I personally own an RV, a 32-foot Class C, and when I go to towns, I don't really expect small towns like ours to accommodate me parking that somewhere on the town street. So I think, as Mr. Carr was saying, the intent was for passenger buses for this pilot parking program, and as Ms. Butterfield said, also the best part of a pilot parking program is you can learn from it and make adjustments going forward from there. So hopefully that's something that can be done. But bus groups are a huge part of the tourism industry here in Gettysburg and Adams County. They're not going away, so I'm thankful that we're trying to find a way to best accommodate them. And as I said, we have a lot of experts here, and if we can provide some assistance, happy to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Public comment. All right, seeing no additional public comment, we will adjourn to executive session. Pardon me.
I got one thing yet.
Mr. Lawler.
You've all heard me mention rather wholeheartedly about what is now officially called ghost poles, or poles that have been replaced but the old poles have not been removed. It seems we're not alone in this. There is a bill in the House right now, House Bill number 1619. The representative that brought this forward is, I believe, from Lycoming County. But nevertheless, I was very disappointed to see that our own representatives did not sign on with it. Because you can't go 2 blocks in this town and not see 2 poles where the top's been cut off and the old pole's still there with phone company lines on it. I also want to point out that the Pennsylvania Utilities Commission, not the PUC, but the active group that represents utilities, is backing this bill. And I would like to see us send letters to our representatives and senator in support of this bill at the very least. Because what this bill is doing is changing the way the PUC handles this problem and is going to give the PUC some teeth so that we don't have these poles that are unsafe sticking around for, as I commonly brought up, my favorite pole in front of ACMB Bank on West Middle Street, which has been that way for 11 years. The phone company showed up about a week and a half ago. They were there about 20 minutes. They threw a bracket on the new pole and they moved their old ones off. It only took them 20 minutes to fix the situation that's been there for 11 years. So I guess, I know some people watch us because when I was with the highway department, the PennDOT inspector for Adams County was a gentleman by the name of Mike Pinko. Sometimes we got along, sometimes we didn't. And he and I ran into a mutual person's 80th birthday party, and he informed me that he watched this meeting and that I didn't know enough about ghost poles. It seems that PennDOT has a permit application for any poles in their rights of way. And you get a 60-day application, and the pole location is only good for one pole. So technically, under their rules and regulations, when you put the new pole in, you gotta take the old pole out the same day. Now, because of the breakup of the phone companies, which I didn't even realize, you could have 3 or 4 phone cables on the same pole and they could all be owned by different companies, especially long distance service. He retired about the same time I did, but PennDOT is beating this to death and they don't have any answers, which he figures they're going to support this bill also. Which opened a question to me, and he didn't have the answer. I don't have the answer. I don't think Harry has the answer, but we gotta look into it. Can we actually permit poles in our street right of ways? I'm not looking for money, I'm looking for control. So maybe that's another avenue we ought to look into. Apparently the PennDOT regs, you can apply for a permit, you have 60 days, put your new pole in, change the old one out, and they will give you one extension for 60 more days. However, they have the same problem that we have, and that's no teeth to enforce it, even though the regulations are on the books. So this bill is trying to put teeth into it to help everybody with this problem. It's definitely a problem statewide. I just think it shows up more in Gettysburg than other places. Although in my travels around the state, I see a fair amount of them. But I mean, within 2 blocks of my house, there's 8. Not a very big area. I don't know, did you ever get a final count, Robbie, of what was in town?
43.
43. It's a big number for a small town.
And they keep adding every day.
Yeah. So, I'd like to see us ask Mr. Mao and Mr. Eckert to support this bill. We can get a letter out to them to support this because we definitely have the problem, whether they see them or not, we do every day.
So I'd ask the members just, if you're looking this up, it's House Bill 1619, that's 1619. Make sure you get 1619 as the session of 2023 to 2024 because they use the numbers over. It's only 4 pages. Please just review that. If you have any objection to the borough sending a letter to the effect that Mr. Lawler's discussing, please let Charles, myself, and Mr. Moon know.
And I gave copies to Sarah and Charles, so maybe if you need a copy of it, Sarah could email it to you. I gave one to Harry too.
Yeah, I can email it to everyone. Actually, that's probably more efficient. It came up right away. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anything else before we adjourn?
I do.
Yes, Mrs. Butterfield?
I thought tonight was really enlightening and hearing so many views, differing views about our bus situation. Chad has been encouraging citizens for ages, over and over, to come and share their views. And tonight we did have a nice turnout to do that. I think it's very helpful. So keep encouraging them, Chad. This was enlightening for me. I was happy to hear their views.
Okay. Anything else? All right. If not, we will adjourn to executive session.